Hello and welcome back. I feel like this Winter Games is like the Wild West a little bit because we have so many returning faces, returning guests. So in between sessions, we have these marathon catch-up sessions and they just hilarity ensues. So to welcome back some people that you have seen before, we are excited to have Joey and John from Otn Media. Hi, how are you doing?
It's doing well. Thanks for having us.
Great. Appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we are really excited to have you back here. And, it's always fun to have interview sessions where I get to interview somebody who is usually the interviewer. So it's a very interesting dynamic. That happened with BBXH last time. It was interesting. So, but before we get into that and the questions, just for folks who are not familiar with you two and OTN Media, could you please just take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit? So, Joey, I'll let you start.
Yeah, sure thing. So I graduated from George Mason University here in the DMV. Graduated with a degree in sport management and sport communication. From there, I went on to work full-time in Parks and Recreation and then part-time over here with OTN Media, which does a lot of coverage in gaming, esports, and sports, which we'll get into here a little bit later.
Excellent.
Absolutely. My name's John. Also went to George Mason University. I actually graduated right next to Joey. So very similar in that as well. Currently an account manager. So all that financial talk and grants talk really hit home. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, working part-time with OTN and Joey and the amazing staff at OTN, and really excited to talk more about it.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in and watching the earlier segment. And maybe you can actually give Grant some pointers next time he has to, work the till at the shop or something like that.
I might be able to.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about OTN Media and just, you do a little bit of everything. Like what all does it include? Joe?
Yeah, I mean, we do quite a bit. So we mainly cover gaming and esports at this point with a little tinge of sports here and there through different mediums. We do articles, we do podcasts, we do streams. We have events that we do a lot, which has been nice because we've worked with a lot of the pro esports and sports teams in the area, casting major events for them and major tournaments. So it's a lot of different things from producing our own content to helping out with major organizations as well.
That's great. And I'm a big fan of doing a little bit of everything myself, being a host, cosplayer, and streamer, you name it, sort of a jack of all trades here in the esports, just like you guys. So John, what is your favorite part of the things that OTN does, or maybe the things that you get to do if you don't get to do all the things that OTN does?
Yeah, well, behind the scenes, I really enjoy trying to get Joey to cosplay. That's something I really wish you'd pick up. I think that'd be great for the streams. I mean, really getting out.
We'll start a petition.
Well, we should start a petition right there along with the OTN TikTok account. So we're, one of the things I absolutely love about kind of doing a little bit of everything in the area is this, getting to meet not just the people behind the scenes in the local esports scene, but like the fans and everything else too. It's really, really cool being a part of a community that's so open-minded, that's so accepting, and being able to bring more information and more content, whether it's through our podcast, whether it's through on-site reporting, whether it's through interviews with fans and putting that out on social media to try to, build up what's going on here in the DMV. It's just a really cool environment to be in. And it's so overwhelmingly positive. And I'm just really happy that OTN can play a little part in that growth of DMV, what I like to call as the East Coast capital of esports.
I like it. That's true. Joey, what's your favorite part?
I mean, working with John, obviously.
Lies.
I mean, there's plenty of different awesome things out there. As John mentioned, like building the community has also been a very fun part, both on the OTN side as well as the DMV side. Just continuing to see how people come together because this is a shared passion amongst them. On top of that, helping build up these bigger organizations like DC United, for example. We know they've been here before. We had the opportunity to kind of help them build their esports program up from the ground up. We've worked with Monumental and a number of other organizations here in the area as well. And I think the biggest thing is just seeing how they've grown over time. Now we have more pro teams in the esports area here with stuff like the Washington Justice, Wizards District Gaming. On the community side, we have more events going on than ever before, it feels like, even in this time with the pandemic kind of shutting a lot of these down. So I think the biggest thing is just seeing everyone grow together has been a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of like when you two talk about growth of the community and growth of the businesses, I can you tell us a little bit about how OTN started and how, because I'm sure you didn't start doing everything like hosting and podcasts, and supporting organizations. How did it start and how did it grow? Because it's interesting because no startup and no business has the same blueprint, right? It's usually folks that are identifying a need in the community or a need in the business space. So how did that happen for OTN Media, John?
Well, Joey was actually the brain behind OTN way back in the day, going back to our time at George Mason. I actually came into the mix probably around 2015, 2016 when I was actually living in Chicago at the time. And funny enough, as much as Joey and I interacted in college, we never knew that each other liked League of Legends. And it's really weird because like you hear about how crazy the League of Legends community can be. And then I remember one day I'm sitting at my place in Chicago and I'm scrolling through Twitter and Joey's tweeting about Fnatic playing in League of Legends. So I was like, wait, you watch League? And I text him real quick and I was like, wait, what is this? And then it just kind of hit off from there. Like discovered like this new branch of our friendship that was never there before. It was kind of funny. And then from there, Joey introduced me to OTN. And then, I mean, I'll let Joey talk about like how he started OTN, but like from there, it's just our passion for gaming and esports, and also being that weird hybrid where we also like traditional sports, where the original root of OTN was, kind of gave us that jump start and that motivation to keep it growing to where we are today.
I like that story. I will say that I think League is it's such a huge game with such a huge fan base that if you meet somebody who's a gamer, you can assume they play one game. You can probably go with League of Legends and then not be wrong most of the time. So I mean, and I say that as a League player. I absolutely love League of Legends. So Joey, tell us how you had the idea for OTN. What is it that you saw first that like, hey, here's a niche that I can fill. Here's something cool that I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually started a lot more simply than it probably sounds to most people. It was a project at George Mason University. I was taking a journalism class at the time, and we were being pushed to like start our own blog type of thing. So I ended up starting a sports blog, and then from there it started to grow. Brought some more friends in as writers, and then eventually we started beating ESPN and a few other big outlets to different posts. And then it kind of blew up from there. It became its own website. We moved from, I think we were on like a blog site like Posterous, however it's pronounced at the time. Then made our own website, moved on over there and just continued to grow. But with us being in college and being freshmen at the time, it was just too much to handle. So it actually got put on ice for a couple of years. We lost kind of the momentum we had originally, and then we revived it after college. My wife told me, hey, you need to get a hobby besides just playing games like League of Legends and things here and there with friends. So I took this up, and then John alongside me, we started to dive into other outlets outside of just writing. We brought up podcasts. We've done some stuff with videos and content, event casting. And that's kind of where it started. It was just all a humble sports blog that was a project at one point that, driven by passion, it kind of became something else. And as John said, just connecting through games has been a big thing. That's how we became friends, and that's how our community has really grown as a whole.
I love that story at the beginning of it being a school project, because looking back at college, I know of like maybe not the whole business. I haven't started a business in college, but there's definitely moments that I can look back and be like, wow, this really changed how I live my life in college. So I really like that story. So tell us a little bit about how the different parts of OTN grew. So it started as a blog or, place where folks went for esports and traditional sports information and news. How did you branch out into podcasts or hosting or, supporting other organizations? Joy, I'll let you take it away first this time.
Yeah, sure thing. So it's similar. We were writing everything and it was doing pretty well at the one point, but then it got put on ice because it was just too much to keep up with. And when we eventually brought it back, it was similar, just with us having full-time jobs and us having families and different responsibilities. It became too much to kind of keep up with the latest news versus like an ESPN or some of these bigger outlets that pay people full-time to do this. So we started to realize that maybe this isn't quite our niche. Like, we're very good at getting stories and finding ways to write about them, but getting them out in a timely manner to compete with all these people who are working in this industry full-time was very tough. So from there, John and I thought we'd take it more of an opinion-based route, and that's kind of where the podcast part popped up.
That makes sense. And Joey, excuse me, John, how about you? What's your sense of how the company grew? Do you have a favorite sort of section that you like to work on?
Yeah, I think back in the blog days, one of the articles I really enjoyed writing was our LCS power rankings, mainly because, no offense to anybody who worked at ESPN at the time, definitely respect everyone in the ESPN esports department before ESPN decided to crazily shut that down their department. But their power rankings were very much ESPN power rankings. In other words, if a bottom feeder went 3-0 in their first week against 3 other terrible teams, guess what? They're 3-0. They're number 1 in the power rankings. And I'm sitting here going like, absolutely not. So I started doing power rankings, and I started adding a little spice to it, definitely throwing that opinion base in there as well. We started to see a little traction there. So to team up with what Joey said, when we saw the opinion pieces really started to get more traction, we're like, okay, well, what if we look at expanding into that podcast area where it's a little bit more of an opinion based show? And we started talking about different areas we could dive into. Do we want to do like an opinion based, League of Legends podcast? Oh, there's like 100 out there. There's, it's going to be tough to compete with them. Everyone and their brother has one of those. So after probably a couple months of brainstorming, we came up with this idea of, a catch-all esports show where we didn't just focus on League of Legends or just on Dota or just on CSGO, but more of, what's happening right now in all of esports. What's the news? What leagues are current? What major events are happening? Let's cover what's current. Let's not just focus on one thing. And that eventually developed into what today is known as Level Up Live, our premier esports and gaming podcast that airs Thursday nights. And it's kind of changed over the years. We just got done recording episode 262. And now we're an official co-streamer for the Game Awards coming up next week. It's kind of crazy to think that this idea back in like 2015, 2016, now all of a sudden is where we are today. But that's really how Level Up got started. And from there, it kind of blew up to where we are today.
That sounds awesome. And I like the idea of pivoting into the opinion based because, you actually spend the time to follow the news, follow the games, follow the teams, and you're able to distill that information to the listeners who maybe are not following, all of the games. They maybe are only following one. I'm just thinking that whenever I watch, League of Legends World Championships, my favorite part is always picks and bans because the casters always bring in very interesting analysis, and it's because they follow the games and it's a little bit informational, a little bit opinion based, and that's fascinating. So I definitely think that's definitely an important part to bring to the esports community. So speaking of esports news, what are some of your hot takes? What are you following right now? What's brewing? What's exciting to follow right now in the world of esports news? Joey?
I mean, there's just so much going on. I feel like it's constant movement right now, even with so many esports leagues in the off season. Then you move into free agency, which is a big thing we're following right now. I mean, League of Legends, Overwatch, all these leagues currently not in season, but because they're not in season, you see contracts changing hands and players signing with new teams, even new regions looking at League of Legends. And I think that's just a big piece there, like what players want to play with other players and who's creating the next super team, who's going to North America because they pay a lot more money than some of the other leagues. So, I mean, it's just fun to kind of keep an eye on who's teaming up with who and how that's all working out. As John said, we're also co-streaming the Game Awards next week. I think that's another big piece to follow up on. The Game Awards are great. It's a great way for the gaming community to come together and vote on what they thought was the best game of the year, or who was the best art directed game, and all these different things. But on top of that, there's a lot of new game reveals as well. So one of the things we try to do on the media side is find out what games are going to be revealed and how can we prepare audio content, written content to get those games ready. So when eventually they drop and everyone's super surprised, we have an article or a video or whatever ready to go as well.
I think that's a really interesting point because, tell us a little bit more about that. And John, feel free to hop in because, the information comes out, right, publicly, and that's when everybody finds out about it. Do y'all have like a secret back door where you can get a little bit of, information ahead of time? Because, like, for example, for Overwatch 2, Grant and I were talking about it, and Grant has said, I don't know really anything, just like everybody else. So to prepare that content that you're talking about, maybe some video, some audio, some content before the information drops, how do you do that, John?
Yeah, so it's a combination of relationships, getting to know people in those areas, but also not necessarily compromising those relationships. Like you mentioned before our segment here, we chatted with Grant a little bit off air, doing a little bit of a catch up there. Like we have a legit friendship with Grant. But also at the same time, it's like he knows we run a media company that covers his team. So we're not going to try to cross that boundary. Obviously he's not going to tell us anything that he's not allowed to tell us. Because trust me, we go after him quite a bit on Overwatch 2, because we want to know also. But a lot of times it's really following the stories, following the information that's coming out, either from other interviews or from press releases from the developer, and kind of connecting the dots. Where are they trying to lead us to? What are they trying to tell us? And then, maybe sending follow-up emails, Twitter messages, hitting people up, on Twitter DMs or on Instagram, finding different ways of where that news is going to come from. And a great example, and it goes off of what Joey was saying too, is kind of like being prepared for when those big stories hit. JBM, the star point guard for WizDG, after 2 seasons announced his retirement. Well, there were rumors and rumblings for a little bit that he was looking at possibly going back to college. So that was one of the things that, like, in the back of our mind, we're like, okay, this is a legitimate thing that could happen. And then when it did happen at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night, where I was like, I remember I texted Joey. I was like, did this really just happen at 10 p.m. on a Sunday? Like, I have to be at work at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. I don't have time for this. And I hop on my computer and I whip up a breaking news video real quick, and we send it out. Like, we try to be as timely as possible. But, much like what Grant was saying in his segment before ours, esports kind of runs on its own clock. There is no set 9 to 5. There is no weekends off. There is, no free time, if you will, where you get to remove yourself. If you want to be one of the leading voices in the area, you have to be constantly engaged, almost 24/7.
Absolutely. That makes sense. That makes sense. Now, what I'm curious about is, there's sort of like parts, right, to what you're doing. You're networking with folks, but you're also just keeping track of the information, looking at those news releases, things like that. You're also then creating content. Can you tell us a little bit about what is that breakdown in terms of time for you? Like, I'm 30% doing this, 50% doing that. What does that look like for you, Joey?
I mean, honestly, I think it varies week to week. On an average week, I would say John and I probably as individuals read about 75 or so articles. And that's just across gaming and esports, mainly, on top of the other stuff we read here and there personally. And then on top of that, the recording aspect, we have moved a lot of our recordings to live. So that's about an hour to an hour and a half for most of those shows. And then from there, the editing portion. One of the kind of tricks that we have found is if you do mess up things, like we say a lot of names in our cast, as well as in our shows, to kind of play off of them. If we don't know how to pronounce them, or if we say something incorrectly, we kind of turn it into a little bit of a joke at this point. So then in the editing, it doesn't necessarily have to sound like we messed up and started over, but rather we're kind of just having fun with ourselves as co-casters and developing that synergy. And that's really helped cut down a lot of our editing time as well. And I think little tricks like that kind of help balance the time a bit more compared to when we originally started, and we would mess up on something and then just take hours to edit everything out, or we would take tons of time planning things. Now it's a lot more off the cuff because we know our audience more, we know the industry more. And I think that's cut down on the time overall. As far as the actual like breakdown, I don't really know on a typical basis. I would say maybe 40 to 60% research on a given week, and then the rest of that time creating the content.
Got it. Got it. No, I think that's really interesting to hear for viewers, or for myself too, like somebody who's not sort of on the cutting edge of creating the information that, you're trying to get news out there, right? So it's interesting to hear just how much of your time actually goes to research rather than creating the podcast. So I think that's very valuable information for folks. So John, how about you? What do you feel like you're spending most time on, least time on? What does that break down for you?
Yeah, I think I'd have a hard time breaking down percentages also. It's not uncommon. And one thing I am thankful for is my full-time job. My boss, while he may not understand esports, he is at least open to the idea that, there is another aspect to what I do, not just for the company, but in my off time. So he's really cool with me, like having a stream up on one of my side monitors, as long as I'm being productive, or listening to an interview with someone in esports on another show, or with a newspaper or another media outlet, so I can kind of keep up to date, as my day goes on, just kind of listening in here and there, trying to catch some information. Joey and I talk, God, probably I don't know, like 80% of the day, most of the days it feels like.
Okay, so 80% of the time is just talking to Joey.
Well,
and
no,
then...
no. And then creating content, the social media posts, the videos, if we have a special event coming up that we're broadcasting, like the Game Awards, we're going to keep plugging that because it's official coach streams.
It's cool.
That's pretty
keep
awesome.
Plugging it.
We have to get the stream layouts set up for that. We have to make sure the audio works, the cameras are set up properly, that there's as little amount of technical issues, so we don't get that awesome NA production and chat spamming, left and right from everyone watching. I want to make sure it's as smooth as possible. So, it really does depend upon what's going on. During the off season, it's a little less chaotic. It's a little more free flowing. We're able to dive more in depth into certain leads, certain stories, take our time creating bigger news pieces, bigger videos. But when the season's up and running, when League of Legends is in full swing, when Overwatch League is back, when the NBA 2K League is going, when EMLS, there we go, is going, it's just a lot to cover. And it's kind of like just following those stories as they come, and then quickly putting together content that we know our viewers and hopefully new viewers and followers will like, so they will engage with OTN as well going forward.
Absolutely. Makes sense. That makes sense. But I'd like to go back to you talking to Joey all day long, because my question is actually, how did you develop your on-air relationship, right? I mean, obviously you were friends and classmates beforehand, which probably really helps because you know each other on a personal level. But on a professional level, how do you develop that dynamic with a co-host that looks good on screen? Joey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of it just comes naturally over time as well. Like John and I are blessed with having a lot of similar passions and things that we tend to pay attention to or tend to play as far as gaming goes. And I think that really has helped bring us together overall. Like League of Legends, for example, I think was a big plus for us when we found out we both played that. It allowed us to kind of bring that together as a passion. And then we started playing League together, and then eventually moving on and playing more competitively together. And then eventually to where we are today, creating content together. So I think that's a big thing. I think learning the strengths and weaknesses of one another is also a big thing for us as well. John is able to talk a lot longer than I am on a typical basis. He also can exert a lot more energy into the way he talks about things, while I take things on a more strategic kind of approach. And that's typically why I go to the color casting part while John goes to the play-by-play. He can talk fast and super energetic, while I can help break down what actually happened during plays. I think stuff like that is kind of what has brought us together and continue to bring us upwards within the industry, as well as just as a pair of commentators together.
That sounds awesome. Now, John, do you have any tips for working with a co-host? How do you figure out the dynamic? How do you make it better?
Yeah, it's trial and error. The one thing that Joey and I kind of joke about is every now and then we'll go back to like our first 50 episodes of Level Up, back when it was like a 2-show-a-week show. And, we joke about episode 1 and in comparison to where we are today. And, we go back and listen to episode 1 and we cringe at it. We'll listen to be like, it's like, oh, there's no chemistry, it doesn't flow, listen to where we are today. It's like, it's kind of cool looking back, looking at that journey. It is a lot of trial and error. It's getting to know each other's personality, how each other thinks in a certain situation, especially when you're trying to describe what's going on screen, like when you're casting, because you're not so much saying what the action is as you are trying to build a story of what's happening. You want the person watching to be able to, if they have to turn their head away from the screen for a second to take care of something, if something fell, if they need to look at their phone or something, we want to make sure they're able to still listen and understand what's still going on. So it's really important, as play-by-play, to kind of paint that picture, but then Joey coming in and be able to take that more analytical approach and kind of dive more in depth as to what went wrong in a certain situation or what went right in a certain situation in a game. And, when we discovered, kind of that's how we kind of fit together as a puzzle, filling in those areas, where, our weaknesses may be, Joey, fits in perfectly and vice versa. After that happened and that chemistry developed, we don't even have to think about it anymore. It just kind of happens. Kind of like it's kind of like yin and yang. It's perfectly balanced in a sense. I'm an extreme extrovert. What am I talking about? Yeah, Joey's more introverted, so it's like knowing that also, and having a lot of friends that are introverts. I have to know as an extreme extrovert, like when to kind of like back down a little bit, because as an extrovert, it can be overwhelming for introverts. So it is a balancing process, and knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses just makes everything so much easier to work together as a team.
And I think the other thing, just to piggyback on that just a little bit, is it varies game to game as well. Like something like Rocket League, which we've casted with the Game Gym, is a lot more play-by-play heavy. It's kind of like a sporting event. You're talking a lot more about the action going on, versus League of Legends, where there's a lot of slow play, like farming creeps necessarily isn't that fun to play-by-play cast, but there's a lot more analysis that goes on throughout. So it's a little bit more color commentary heavy, and finding that balance from game to game and show to show, I think is something we've grown quite good at.
That's definitely a good point. Although I will say, if you have some time, I would love to watch an entire video of play-by-play League of Legends where you're just commentating like farming and like that's it.
It's funny you say that, because what was like 100 shows ago now, we were actually talking about Farming Simulator. It has nothing to do with League of Legends, but Farming Simulator, believe it or not, is an esport. It's very popular in Europe. I will never understand why it's popular, but one of our viewers during the live show asked us to essentially shoutcast a Farming Simulator event, and have never played Farming Simulator, never watched Farming Simulator, have no desire to watch or play Farming Simulator.
The last one's unnecessary. They're very fun, let me tell you.
I will take your word for it. It's just not being downloaded on my computer. No, it's not my thing. And so, I kind of jokingly did a play-by-play of what I thought Farming Simulator would be, and it's still to this day like one of our most viewed clips that someone in our community was super nice enough to clip and post for everyone to watch years later. So it was really awesome. But yeah, Joey, I think we may have to try to take that challenge on. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be quite the experience for sure.
All right, well, we just have 1 minute left. So can you just tell folks if they would like to learn more about OTN Media, join you on your podcasts or watch your videos, how can folks find you?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is over on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at OTN Media. It's at OTN Media on most of those platforms. On Instagram, it does have the underscore, so it's at OTN_media. We podcast Level Up, as John said, our general gaming and esports podcast, every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And then for the local DMV folks who are tuned in here today as well, we have Game on DC, and that is Mondays every other week during the off season at 8 p.m. Eastern time.
That's awesome. Well, John and Joey, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always an absolute pleasure to talk to you and to have you at Game Gym. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.